It's Jeff Gottlieb. We're going to talk some more about earth skills today. And to reminder, what do I mean by earth skills? They are things that people know how to do that have a bearing on their connection with the earth and living things. And they could be ancient traditional things people used to do, or things people are doing right now to help them live, help them have a better life. So today I wanted to talk more about the kind of things that I'm doing on my place so that I can live better, and you can use it as an example if you wish. And one of the things that's important on my place is what we might call homesteading. And homesteading would be setting up your land, developing your land, growing things on your land, building things on your land that make it different than just property that you own, in that it gives you value back. And what kind of value could it give you back? Well, you could grow food, you could build buildings that allow you to do work at your place. Anything that you might do with your land that's going to give you back value and make you more self-sufficient. So one of the things that I've put a lot of energy into is natural building. And I wanted to show you some things about a building that I built on my place. I didn't want to spend a fortune. I didn't want to take out a loan. I didn't want to have somebody else do all the work for me. I wanted to learn. I wanted to do it myself. I wanted it financially accessible, and I wanted it natural. So I did some studying on how I could do what we call natural building. And what I settled on, there are many, many ways and many strategies people are using to build with natural materials, local materials. If you're in a place that has millions of flat rocks of good quality, well, maybe you should build your house out of stone. And if you live in a place where there's a lot of timber, maybe you should build your house out of logs. The logs would need a lot less energy than if you are milling them into boards and lumber. So what do I have on my property? Well, I have dirt. And my dirt in some of my property is this beautiful red terracotta clay, and it's practically pottery quality. Like here, I can squish a little pot out of it right now. It doesn't matter. So this could make a really useful building material that's been used all over the world for thousands of years, and there are literally buildings that are many hundreds of years old, made out of clay dirt, sand, chopped plant material, and water. And you make a mud, and you add all those things together, the sand, the fibers, the clay, and the water, and you build with it. And that's called cob. So one thing I learned about cob from playing with it a little bit is it's incredibly labor intensive to build with it. So if you have lots of laborers or lots of time, it's really cheap because it's just dirt, sand, and chopped straw. So if you have time and not money, you might build with cob. But I thought that I could get moving on it a little faster if I went with a different method. So I cut some logs and I built a timber frame. And a timber frame is using either just round wood as it comes off the tree or milled pieces, and cutting the pieces so that you can fit them together with kind of massive corner posts and efficiency. So you have many fewer pieces making your building stand up. They're thicker and they fit together with very strong joints. So you can use wood that people haven't put that much work into. It's a lot less work for a sawmill to make rough 6x6s than to make smooth 2x4s and sell them to you. So it saves a lot of work. Plus, I cut a lot of these logs myself. I even split some of the logs to get a fairly flat surface, smoothed the flat surface even smoother, and hewed the curved surface so that it had basically a piece with two flat sides, and the other sides were roughly flat. So that was called hewing. So I hewed those beams myself, and I made my door frame out of that stuff. So this has been a great learning experience. I've put so much energy into learning about the different materials and where I get them and how to turn them from this is a forest to this is a house. So once I had the frame up, it's just corner posts and frames. I had to fill in somehow to make walls. And this is the wall material. This is hay that's literally made from grasses like we usually make hay, but also the most important ingredient is this viney stuff that's in through here. This is kudzu. This is the vine that is smothering the South that naturalists like to hate and gardeners like to shake their fist at. But in reality, there are so many things people are learning to use it for, and so many traditional uses. It comes from Japan. And there's one fellow that bales kudzu hay. So I bought many square bales. This is just one flake of hay from a regular square bale tied with 2 strings like you buy regular bales of hay. And just think of them as large, slightly soft bricks. And I would stack the bricks into the frame, made walls. And those would be, of course, soft and floppy. So I then tacked chicken wire over it and so laced some wire through the wall, chicken wire on both sides. So with all of the wire lacing the inside to the outside, it compressed the wall and kept the bales from being able to wiggle. And then the wire was tied to the posts at the ends. So, tough stuff. And once that was done and the wall was fairly straight and was going to be strong, then I made plenty of nice soft mud pies, even softer than this lump that I'm molding in my hand, so that I could take a glob of it and slap it on the wall and smear it. And plastering works better. You're not dabbing it. You're sliding it along so that the stuff works its way into all the ins and outs, the cracks and crevices. And the chicken wire is basically a gripping surface because it's got, catchy places. So whatever you smear on there, once you let it dry, it's got chicken wire in it once it's dry, and it won't just fall off the wall. Cracking was minimal, and the great thing about making things out of dirt, it's always more dirt. So if you get a crack, you can always go back later and fill it in. So that's how I did my house. I did a metal roof so that I could catch water. I wanted to catch rainwater to use for everything from washing to watering plants to anything you need water for. So I have some pictures of my little house, and we might be able to zoom in on those. Let me find them. Okay, so we this way before, didn't we? Yes, we did, and we zoom in on so we can get a close-up of that picture. And what you're looking at here is the kind of orangey color of the material. That's just the natural clay as the exterior plaster. There's nothing on the outside of that except one magical ingredient. Can we possibly get a better look at what's on the near corner of the building there? I don't know if we can.
That's about as far as I can zoom.
Alrighty. Well, let me see if maybe I can zoom. Alright, there we go. How about that? When I finished plastering the outside of the building, I noticed some lumps and bumps on the wall because it's made out of bales that don't match up perfectly. So once you smear clay over it, you get irregular surfaces. Well, the irregularities were the shape of an elephant. So I got different colored clay, and I sculpted this elephant out of the clay, and he's a hit. Now, I didn't know when I first saw that elephant that it was going to be a baby elephant. So he's a very cute elephant. But it made me think of all kinds of other things that, elephant symbolism and what we know about elephants. Here is a view of the inside, and it's really charming. It's got a wood stove. It's got a single bed. it's very functional, and it has served me well even in these very, very cold temperatures. When we had 3 degrees a couple of weeks ago, I needed to put a lot of wood in the stove, but it was fine. So I hand built my house out of plants and dirt and things like that. So there's a fair amount of store-bought stuff, hardware, roofing metal, things like that. But I'm pretty proud of it. It's really a fun place to hang out, and I gotta thank the noxious weed kudzu for a lot of it. I think the kudzu bales, because the vines are tougher than grass, the bales are firmer than regular grass hay bales. So everything's worked out great, and we might revisit construction techniques at a later date and get more pictures and show more pictures. But that's one of the things that I did on my homestead. So I was able to pay for my whole house. Anything that were expenses, they were cheap, and they came incidentally over a period of time as I was building. I didn't do this all at once in a hurry. I did it to the extent that I knew what I was doing, and then when I ran out of knowing what I was doing, I would stop, ask questions, read books, think about it, figure out my way, and then come back to the project months later and do some more. So I never got in over my head, and it never cost me more at one time than I was able to pay for. And truly, it was a very, very financially inexpensive building to build. But the labor was really, really large. But it was a wonderful learning experience. So now I could say I actually know how to do this, which is pretty exciting. It's not very big. It's only a 10 by 10, so it's not really a house. It's just a little studio, which is fine. So more on house building at another time. So that's a really important and exciting thing about homesteading. Okay, I'm going to introduce a big fat word that actually informs all of what I'm doing, and that word is permaculture. And what I mean by that is the design science, how to design your living so that you're fulfilling 3 conditions. One is you take care of people. Obviously, it's not a sustainable system. It's not going to last, and it's not going to be functional if it actually harms you while it's being used. So it's got to be good for you and other people. And let's be inclusive. It can't be bad for some people if it's good for other people and still be permaculture. Okay. The other thing is it has to be good for the environment, living things, all living things. So it can't be good for people but destroy a fish population, or good for people but require clear cutting of an enormous forest. Or, So it has to not only serve people, it also has to serve the ecosystem. And the third is it has to return a surplus to the system. And what does that mean? Some sort of a yield. What does it do? Well, maybe it grows vegetables, and you could sell some vegetables. Or maybe the land on which you're doing your homestead grows a certain number of timber trees every 20 years, and you use the lumber. You can build it, you can sell it. So whatever it is, it should yield a surplus. And it could yield it for you. It could yield it back to the system itself. Heck, your permaculture efforts, the surplus could be growing topsoil. That's certainly an input back into the system. And you want to do that anyway, because sustainability with living things without growing topsoil can't last. You're mining. If you're using up topsoil and it's getting worse, you're a miner, you're not a farmer. So, any activity you can think of that's part of your life, you could design it using permaculture principles. And one thing that helps me a lot in deciding how to work on something are these wonderful slogans that come with permaculture education. And some of them would be like, the problem is the solution, as one. And really what they mean by that is not that the problem itself is the solution to its own problem, but that in solving one problem, or rather in examining what you should do for one problem, you're going to end up solving a different problem. Like, let's say I raise rabbits, which I do. So let's say I have rabbits and they poop. Of course they do. You put food in one end, you're going to get rabbit poop out the other end. So some people, if you're not thinking about all the inputs and all the outputs and the returns to the system, might look at that manure and say, well, that's a waste product. That's a problem. It smells. You can't stay there. I got to do something with it. I have to put in energy to throw it away. Well, what if it solved a different need? What if you took all your rabbit manure and you put it on your garden soil? Now you're going to grow more and better vegetables than you did before. So that's not a waste product now. Now it's a resource. So when you turn wastes into resources, that would be a way of turning one problem into something else's solution. So I like that one. And another one would be stacking functions. If you're going to come up with a solution, I like it if it will help with more than 3 things at once. Because we could spend a lot of time, energy, and money attacking each problem one item at a time and have each thing that we do only help one thing. We'd have a lot of problems with redundancy, and we wouldn't have enough hours in a day to get everything done. But yeah, so I have land, I have soil that's improving all the time. I saw that I have a place that's fairly sloped, and I saw that when it rained really hard, the rain was carrying the topsoil away. I could see that parts of my land had beautiful black, fluffy, crumbly soil, and this slopey area was down to red clay with pebbles sticking out. And it was because the rainwater was carrying all of the topsoil to the bottom of the slope. So I thought, well, how can I stop it? How can I keep the good stuff, not let it get away, and hold on to the water so it isn't rushing down and cutting things, and holding on to the water so it can water plants? So my house is built on a level spot. Well, I live in the mountains. There are no level spots. If you want a level spot, you have to make one, unless you're right next to a stream, which is not a good place to build a house. So my excavator guy came and he, carved away the clay and he made a level spot for the house. And then he asked me the question that stopped me in my tracks. Every time he comes, he asks me the same question, and I'm unprepared. And the question is, what do I want him to do with the dirt? It was a lot of dirt. It was a lot more dirt than I thought it would be. It's not a very steep slope, so I thought, yeah, just go from that to that on that one little spot. It was loads and loads and loads of dirt. So I had him pile it up in long rows and make these terrace ridges on contour. I have 3 of them. And those 3 ridges have completely slowed the water down. So I get to keep the water, my soil is building, and I don't lose my topsoil, and I have garden beds. That's where I plant my plants. So those raised garden beds, when we had a very, very rainy spring, didn't flood. Everybody was saying, oh, my tomatoes are drowning. My tomatoes weren't drowning. They did just fine, because they were 1.5 foot higher than the rest of the soil on top of this ridge. So the problem was, what do you do with the dirt? The answer was, well, just stick it over here, and it prevented erosion, gave me a place for garden beds, and held water. So that's three things that it did. So, all these little slogans, all these things to shoot for, help you to be efficient and effective and sustainable. So that's why I like it. The original coiner of that term was Bill Mollison, an Australian fellow who really thought out how do natural systems work. Where does energy come into a piece of land you're considering? How does energy exit? Energy can be water moving from gravity, sunlight is energy, wind is energy, all this kind of stuff. So he's looking at natural systems. So being a professional naturalist, I really took to permaculture like a duck to water, because all of the study that I did of ecology, in other words, plants and animals and how they fit into their environment, was absolutely germane to this. So anything that I'm thinking of in order to make better habitat for garden plants, or to take worms into consideration, or to live in a house that doesn't cost a lot of money, or anything like that, I was using my nature knowledge. If I knew one kind of tree from another, that's going to help me when I'm getting wood for construction purposes. So, when I got my piece of land, it was really important to me to take a while, check out what the resources were, what the limitations were, what the needs were, and work it out. So I spent a lot of time just basically standing where I could get a viewpoint of some area of the land and just kind of staring at it or looking at it, or, scratching my head and saying, well, what happens when the wind blows really hard over here? What does water do when it's raining? Because we don't usually stand out in the rain and watch water. So after the rain is done, we go out and see what it did. But it would be really valuable to go out in the rain with your rain hat on and whatever, and just watch how the water moves. Where does it go? Where does it go fast? Where does it go slow? Where does it soak in? Where does it run off? Where does it pool? Where does it cut? So those are all going to be important. I mean, where does it cut is real important in your driveway. And since I've lived in the mountains these 7 years, I've paid a lot of attention to driveways and water. And it helps a lot to think about what will water do. Well, the longer the water spends time on your driveway going downhill, the faster it moves, the more sediment it picks up, and the more it cuts the ground underneath it. So, I like to just look at the characteristics of the place and those forces acting on it, and then you want to make decisions on, well, what you're going to do with this area, what you're going to do with that area. And that was such a fun exercise, such a fun thought process. So, what did I decide to do, or what can you do with a piece of land? Well, one thing is I grow things to eat. So I grow fruit trees, I grow a lot of vegetables, and I have tried as much as possible to grow perennials, things that once you put them in, they grow themselves. Things that they may die back above the ground, but the roots are going to put up new stems in the spring, and things like that. So, gardening where I constantly have to dig in the soil, plant new things, harvest them, weed them, work on them, that's a lot of work. But if I can only find plants that either they're wild plants and they're valuable to me just the way they are, or they're hardy and they take care of themselves. One example would be Jerusalem artichokes. They're a sunflower, and they have delicious edible tubers. And they're very bountiful. So all you need to do is stick a couple of tubers in the ground. They'll grow in crummy soil, they'll grow in great soil. So one of my areas that got plenty of sunshine, that had been mowed, my land had been a pasture before I got it. So I thought, well, why don't I use up some of this lawn so I don't have to mow it? And I put Jerusalem artichokes in there. That was 6.5 years ago. And that patch of Jerusalem artichokes grows 3 or 4 buckets of Jerusalem artichoke tubers a year. And truth be told, I wish I liked them better. I eat them. They're good. Other people like them better than I do. So, what do I do with them? I sell them. I sell them at the farmer's market. I sell them, to anybody that might consider planting them themselves. They're beautiful. They're a medium-sized yellow sunflower. They grow 10 feet tall. They're just beautiful plants. And they exclude weeds all by themselves. You don't have to do anything. They drop all of the leaves and dead stalks right onto place, and they basically mulch themselves and fertilize themselves. I barely add anything to that patch at all. So, I recommend them. So what else can you do with things that you do? Well, you can grow things that you eat, like I did. You can grow things to sell and turn a profit. You can grow things that help you in whatever other businesses you're doing. So I teach educational programs on earth skills, primitive skills, historic, living history kind of things. So I always need things like the right stick. I might need a perfectly straight stick, 18 inches long and as thick around as my pinky, to make, to put a sharp stone point so that kids can use it to practice drilling holes in things. So I have areas on my property and also on my neighbor's property that are basically a stick farm. That's the best harvest that comes out of that piece of property. They are stumps that were cut that are resprouting. They are seedlings that are just starting. They are they're really straight because they're crowded and they have to go straight up to get light, because if they were to spread out and take their time getting tall, they wouldn't get any light. So they don't bother with lots of side branches and they go. So I'm experimenting with willow, because willows have lots of functions. One is they'll take a wet area and use so much water that they'll actually dry the soil out, that you could plant other things near them that need kind of moderate water rather than sopping water. That wood is light and fine and can be used to make charcoal. So they grow really, really fast, so they stabilize the soil, and they produce many, many, many feet of twigs per every year. And you could take those twigs and put them in a closed can and just roast the can until all of the material inside has turned to charcoal. And that is some of the finest drawing charcoal that you can make. So I'm planning on a batch of drawing charcoal this year. Plus, this particular variety, I'll make baskets out of. So, it's great. So, what's going on with my place? My biggest goal is to save energy. Money is one form of energy that I like saving. I like having to have a life that I really enjoy and not have to work to make money to spend to get the life I enjoy. Why don't I just have a life I enjoy and not need to make the money, and then I don't have to do that. I don't have to do work I don't like. So my place currently, excuse the pun, doesn't have electricity, so no current. I'm planning on solar. I have bought solar panels, but I've owned them for a year and a half and I haven't attached them all up yet. It's one of those projects that I'm about to jump off, but I haven't jumped yet. So I don't understand electrical stuff very well, and until I do, I'm not playing with wiring. One thing that works well for me is that I'm an owner builder. Yeah, I'm an older builder too, but I'm an owner builder, which means that I didn't pay somebody else to do it. I had the pleasure and the education and the money-saving aspects of doing it myself. And because I did it myself, and it didn't cost a lot of money, I didn't take out a loan, I am not in debt, I have no bills. I have no electric bill. I have no rent. My tax bill is very low because I have insignificant little buildings on my property. I don't have $1 million house. And I grow a lot of my own food. Another one of my goals is just to do things with my land that makes me happy. What things do I do? Well, I leave a lot for bird habitat because I'm an avid birder. I grow plants that are beautiful, and it's very peaceful and quiet there. It's amazing. An electrical field in your house makes a hum. Every appliance makes noise. They all make noise. What if you didn't have any of those sounds at all? It'd just be bird song, your neighbor down the road's dog barked. That's the only sounds. It's great. And to educate myself. So I would say that doing any of these earth skills, whether they're primitive or nature study or things with craftsmanship, or if you're working with permaculture, the biggest goal and the biggest reward is the education that you get. So that's what I've been harvesting has the best crop of all the things that I've grown and built and done, is all the things that I've learned in the last 7 years. And that, I think, will wrap us up.